Rates are essentially ratios, but they are ratios that compare two different quantities, or quantities which are measured with two different units. And a rate can be expressed as a ratio. It can also be expressed as a fraction, but it is difficult to express as a percent since the units must be stated, and percent usually does not have units. So anytime we compare two quantities, we can compare this as a rate. So if our heart beats 240 times in 3 minutes, we can state this comparison as beats to minutes. We're comparing beats to minutes in a ratio. And since it's a ratio, we can more simply put it in a fraction form of 240 beats per 3 minutes. So this comparison of beats to minutes, this ratio of comparison of two different quantities, represents a rate of beats per minute. These ratios or these rates can be often expressed as a unit rate, which means that we make the comparison not to, in this case 3 minutes, we make the comparison to 1. So the denominator quantity becomes 1. And that's something that we call a unit rate. And these unit rates we have dealt with before, more informally, but we have dealt with these before, that when we divide these two units, we get our multiplier between the numerator and denominator. When we divide these two quantities, we get our multiplier, which is also a unit rate. So to find a unit rate, we must divide the two numbers. Okay, so how do we determine the unit rate? We divide. Okay, we divide to get a unit rate. And that unit rate, since we got multipliers by dividing, that unit rate essentially is a multiplier. So if we want to find a unit rate for velocity, we would measure the unit rate in kilometers per 1 hour. So if I have, for example, 300 kilometers, and I do that in 6 hours, there's my ratio of comparison. This is a rate, kilometers to hours. If I want to find this unit rate, I divide these quantities to get kilometers per hour. In this case, I would end up with 50 kilometers per hour. And these unit rates are very useful. We have used them before. They're often called conversion rates because these are our multiplying factors that we use when we do our rate problems. A unit price is a unit rate that makes it easier to compare the cost of similar items. For example, if we want to find out the compare costs of apples, we would want to compare the unit rate or cost per apple. So if I had something that cost $1.49 per apple, and I had another apple that costs, for example, $2 for 2 apples, these are a little bit hard to compare, but if I convert this into a unit rate of $1 per 1 apple, okay, so in one situation I'm paying $1.49 for 1 apple. In another situation I'm paying $1 for 1 apple. We can now compare these two rates to see which is the better deal. Another example would be when we're shopping, we often see things given in dollars per kilogram. Okay, so we might be paying $0.79 per kilogram for one item. We might be paying more or less per kilogram for another item. And if it's in a unit rate, they're much easier to compare. So to find a unit rate, we divide. Right? We divide. So we determine a unit rate by dividing. And the unit rate can go either way. So I can actually find two different unit rates here. So this person earns $108 per 9 hours of work. There's my rate. This is a perfectly valid rate. However, we often want to convert this into a unit rate. And to convert this into a unit rate, we divide. So 108 divided by 9 works out to be 12. And the rate is dollars per 1 hour, or dollars per hour. The rate can also be, unit rate can be done in the reverse, because we may want to know how many hours per $1. So in this case, this is the rate for 1 hour. There are some situations where we may want to know the hours for $1. And again, to find this unit rate, we would end up dividing. So we take 9 hours. So 9 hours divided by $108. We end up with 0.083 repeating. And the rate here is hours for $1. So we need to work that many hours to earn $1. Here we have 660 words in 10 minutes. So here's my ratio, 660 words in 10 minutes. There's my ratio, or my rate. This is my rate. If I want to convert this into a unit rate, I divide. So I end up with 66 words for 1 minute, or words per minute. Now, for whatever reason, I may want to know what we call the reciprocal rate, or the opposite rate, minutes per word. Well, in that case, I would just write the minutes on top, 660 words on bottom. There's my reciprocal rate, or my rate for minutes per word, and dividing will give me my unit rate. So the unit rate in this case, and this is an awkward unit rate, not that I would really want to use this unit rate. So this is 0.15 minutes for every word, some fraction of a minute for every word that I type. Okay. Now, in both these cases, probably this rate of dollars per hour and words per minute is much more useful than the reciprocal rate, but the reciprocal rates do come in handy. So it is important to understand that rates are directional, just like with ratios. And if I want to find a unit rate, I divide.